In the previous video, we looked at the basic CRUD operations for a Blazor application using SQLite and Dapper. In this video, we'll create a project page to add, edit and delete a project. Without further ado, let's look at the code. If it's not already open, open Visual Studio and we'll go to the Pages folder. We want to add the projects page, so right-click on Pages, select Add and raise a component. We're going to call it Project Page. The name of the page must begin with an uppercase letter, and as I've discovered before, naming a razor component exactly the same as a model can cause problems. Hence, I've got Project Page. Select Add. A very basic page is created. A typical razor page for a Blazor application has a directive at the top of the page with routing to a URL, followed by any using statements and/or injecting any services needed. The next section is HTML, or actually CS/HTML, where the CS stands for C#. That will render the page, followed by C# code identified by the @code symbol. We'll start by adding the directives at the top of the page. And this consists of a route that will send us to /project. We're going to be using the data folder, so I've included the @using here, and we'll also be using the project service to read and write data. Next, we will be adding some Syncfusion controls, and to save adding using statements at the top of all the pages, we can add the required statements into underscore imports. Select underscore imports, and we add the following using statements. I also want to amend the menu to allow us easy access to the page, which will be particularly helpful whilst testing. So open Nav menu, which is under the shared folder, and comment out the counter section, and we'll change the href to project and the name to projects. And I'll save that. Now we'll return to the project page, and I'm now going to replace this code with the following. And what this does is put a horizontal line underneath the title. Actually, I think we'll change that to just projects. And then under the horizontal line, we've got a Syncfusion grid, and we've got a data source of projects for that, which will come onto it in a second. We've got grid columns, and we've got two columns, one for the project name and one for the user email. And we define these by saying grid column field equals name of the model name. The header text at the top of the column is going to say project, and the text is going to be left aligned, and I've given it a nominal width of 60. Similarly for the user email. I've declared an IEnumerable of type project called projects, which is the data source for the grid, and when the page opens, it's going to start this method on initialized async, and that's going to use our project service, project readall, to get all the projects from the database. We have no data at this point, but if we run the application, we should get an empty grid. Project runs, and there we have our empty grid with column headings saying project and user email, and no data to display. So we can close that. I want to add a toolbar to the Syncfusion grid to open dialog boxes to allow the user to add, edit and delete records. To add a toolbar to the grid, we add the keyword toolbar to the SF Grid opening tag. We also have to declare a list for the toolbar items, i.e. for add, edit and delete, and we need to add toolbar items to the onInitialized async. So to do that, we change the SF Grid to include the toolbar keyword and the toolbar items. We need to add the declaration for the toolbar items, and we need to add some code in here to populate the toolbar items. So we've got 3 toolbar items: add, edit and delete, with tooltips and icons. And if we run the project again just to test everything is okay, we should see the toolbar. And there's our toolbar at the top of the grid. Clicking on the buttons doesn't do anything at the moment, but we'll tackle that right now. The code we need is to add a grid events tag to the Syncfusion grid and a method to handle a toolbar click. So we'll change the grid by including the SF grid events. So we've got grid events on toolbar click, and we're going to call a method called toolbar click handler, and the T value is project. And to add the bare bones of the code for the toolbar handler, we'll have this. Let me just get rid of a few spare lines up here as well. So we've got the toolbar click handler, which has got 3 events: add, edit and delete. And now we need the code for handling these events. We're going to add and edit project records using a pop-up dialog. It will only contain text boxes for the project name and user email, plus buttons to save and record or cancel. When called by the toolbar add button, the text boxes will be blank, awaiting for the user to enter new data. If called by the toolbar edit button, the text boxes will be populated with existing data for the row selected by the user. The CS/HTML code for the complete add edit dialog box we need to place underneath the SF grid section. And this consists of an SF dialog, Syncfusion dialog, with a reference, and we're calling this dialog box dialog add edit project. It's modal, which means that if the user clicks outside of the dialog, nothing will happen. I'm setting a nominal width of 500 pixels. I'm not showing the close icon, i.e. the cross in the top right hand corner, because I want to force the user to either click save or cancel, and I'm going to allow dragging. So if there's data underneath the dialog box, the user will be able to drag the dialog box out of the way. And initially, I'm setting its visible property to false. Then we've got a header, and that's going to be populated with a variable called header text, which I'll come on to shortly. And then it's going to consist of an edit form. And the model for the edit form I'm calling project add edit. And on a valid submit, we're going to call a method called save. I'm using data annotations here so that we can read the data validation error messages from the model. That is the project model, project.cs. Then we've got 2 text boxes. One for the project. So it's going to have a placeholder or label of project, and that's going to be of float label type always. This means that the word project will appear in the text box until the user starts typing in that text box, at which point it will go above the text box, so the user always knows that it's project that needs to be filled in here. is going to be bound to the project add edit project name field, and the validation message is going to come from the project model file. Similarly, we've got the same kind of thing for the user email. At the bottom of this section, we've got a section for buttons, we've got the save button and a cancel button, and if the user clicks the cancel, we're going to call the close dialog event. So this is the code for the add edit dialog, but we have no way of displaying it. To do this, we need to look at the code for the add edit buttons in the toolbar. But before we do this, we need to declare the new variables we have just introduced. So in the declaration section here, in the at code, we want the following. We want to declare the SF dialog, and we want to declare the project add edit object, which is going to be of type project, and we want a string for some header text, which I'm just setting to an empty string to start with. So we should find that some of these errors that we've got up here have started to disappear. As I said, we've got to open the dialog box using the toolbar click handler. So if we go for the code for adding, or if the user clicks the add button, we want to replace this with this code. So it's going to present project add edit dialog, but we're going to initialize the project add edit object with a new project to ensure that a blank form is shown when we're displaying. We're changing the header text to add a project, and we're then going to display the dialog. This will open the dialog, but we need two methods, one to handle save and one to handle the cancel buttons. So to add the new save method, we'll go to the bottom and add this. So what this is doing is saying is if the project ID is 0, which it will be if it's a new record, we're going to call the project service project create, and we'll be passing to it the whole of the project add edit object, and then we'll be refreshing the data grid by going to the database and using read all and using status change to force a refresh, and then awaiting this close dialog, which is effectively the cancel. If the object is being edited, we'll use project update instead of project create. So if the project ID is not 0, it'll mean the record is being edited. I'm using try catch here, so if there's an error, we'll be displaying a warning message down here. If the user clicks the cancel button, we need a new method for the close dialog, which we can have down here. That simply says just close the dialog, and that we're forcing a refresh of the grid by status changed. I think that should have got rid of all the red squigglies up here, which it has. So that should allow us to add a new project with validation messages if we enter invalidator, but we won't be able to edit or delete a record. So let's run the project now. So click on projects. If we click delete, nothing happens. If we click edit, nothing happens. But if we click add, we get our new dialog box appearing. And I can enter some data. But maybe I ought to just leave that blank to start with, to show the data validation at work. So if I leave it blank, it says project name is required. If I leave user email blank, it says user email is required. So let me go back and put in the name here. And if I enter an incorrect format for an email, such as that, I get invalid email address format. So data validation is working. And if I click Save, it'll add it. We ought to deal with the hopefully unlikely possibility that the project create service will fail. So let's go back to the code. Unfortunately, Syncfusion provides an easy way to display warnings. It's called the SF dialog service. To use this service, we need to place the following at the top of the file to inject the SF dialog service, and we need to also amend the program.cs by including that in the builder section. And to complete this, we also need to open main layout.razor, and under body we need to add this. So we can now add warnings to the saved method where we currently just have placeholder comments. So on Razor page for project, under the save, we've just got a warning message here. We can now change that with that saying an unexpected error has occurred, and the same for editing. I'll change that as well while we're here. Just to demonstrate that, I know one way that I can force an error is to try adding a duplicate record. So let's run it again and see that we get that error message. It's the project name that there's going to be a check for duplicates, or rather the database has got a constraint that says that the project name must be unique. So if I try saving it now, I get unknown error, an unexpected error has occurred. There is a way of highlighting the fact that this is a duplicate, and I'll mention that in the blog post that goes with this video. Right, so I'll cancel that and go back to the code. To edit a record, we want the user to select a record from the grid and then click the Edit button. To detect this, we'll use an additional Syncfusion grid event called rowSelected, and that will link to a new method, which for simplicity we're going to call rowSelectHandler. Each row of the grid has the whole project object in memory, and we can use that fact to populate the edit record dialog with the data we need. We'll start by declaring variables for each of these fields of the record selected from the grid by the user. So we're going to add those to the declaration section. And the variables we'll need are these. We need an integer for the selected project ID. We'll need a string for the project name and a string for the user email. And I'm setting these all to either empty strings or 0. To capture the row selected by the user, we now need to change the grid events tag to include row selected. So we're going to replace the whole of the grid events with this, which actually just includes the row selected keyword and the method rowSelectHandler. And if we add the code for the rowSelectHandler, I'm going to add that at the bottom. What that's going to do is it's going to pick up all the arguments from the project object and populate the selected project ID, project name and user email with the data from the grid. So we've now got the data from the grid for the row that we've just selected. And we can now deal with the toolbar click handler for the edit button. So to deal with that, we go back up to the edit button, and here we say if the user clicks the edit button, we want this to happen. So first of all, we check that the user has actually selected a row, And if they haven't, we use the Syncfusion dialog service to display a warning. Otherwise, we set the project add edit object to the values that we've just got from the grid, from the row select handler. Then we're going to change the header text to say edit project, and then we're going to call the dialog box. So the dialog box will now display with the data from the grid. The code previously used for the dialog add edit project will then handle the save and the cancel options. So if we run the application now, we should be able to test that an edit works. So we've got our record here, and if I select edit, edit project comes up as the heading for the dialog box, and I can save the change. So far so good. The next stage is to handle the delete. So let's close this and go back to the code. One of the options of the Syncfusion dialog service is to ask the user for confirmation of an action. And we can therefore simply use the Syncfusion dialog service to ask the user to confirm that they want to delete the currently selected record. And we're going to do that by inserting the following into the delete section of the toolbar handler. So here we've got the code for deleting. And again, we check that the user has selected a row from the grid. And if not, we say, please select a project. We set a Boolean saying is confirm, and then we await the Syncfusion dialog service. And what we're saying here, and notice it's confirm async rather than, what was it before? Alert async. We're now incorporating the selected project name into the text being displayed in both the header and the text for the confirmation. Then if confirmation is true, we then just go to project delete, calling the project delete service with the selected project ID. And then after that's completed, we refresh the grid by using project read all. So let's just test that that's working. So first of all, I'll click delete, and it gives us the warning no project has been selected. If I select it, click delete, two things happen here. It's got Harefields Manners in the name of the dialog box, and in the text it's also asking the user whether they want to delete Harefield Manners or the name of the project. So there's a kind of double check here. If they say cancel, it doesn't get deleted. On the other hand, if I select delete, it will get deleted. And we're now back to no record to display. So that fulfills the function of this. We've got add, edit and delete. There is one further complication that we might like to think about, and that is we've got constraints on the database to prevent us adding duplicate records. So let me just add Harefields again. Now if I try adding it again, we get the unexpected error. Now we can check for duplicates. I'm not going to go into the code for that here, but I will add it to the blog post, which I'll show at in the description of this video. So that pretty much completes this video. We've now got the methods in place for adding, editing and deleting records. And next we'll move on to the main point of the whole video, which is the cascading grids. I'll put links in the description to the blog post and any other links that I think might be useful. Thank you very much for watching this, and I hope I won't be quite so long before the next video is released. Thank you.